You are listening to the Freedom Podcast with Van Moody. Our desire is that you begin to live in freedom every day. Freedom in your mind, freedom in your finances, freedom from the external pressures of life. Prepare to be transformed as we seek to be free, mind, body, and soul. Let's get started.
Hey friends, welcome to the Freedom Podcast with myself, Dr. Van Moody, and I am blessed to be joined by my co-host with the most, Pastor George Thompson, the Financial Maven all the way from LA. On the Freedom Podcast, we always explore a variety of topics that will help us to live our very best life, a life of freedom, a life of purpose, and most importantly, a life of fulfillment. And we know one of those important topics is finances. And so every month, we're going to talk about financial freedom and everything that pertains to financial freedom, all of the ancillary topics connected to helping us to live our very best life financially. And so every time that we get a chance to do this once a month, I am blessed to be joined by my co-host, my brother, my friend, Pastor George Thompson. How are you doing today, my friend?
Man, I'm doing awesome. Excited about our show.
Excellent, excellent. Well, George, on a previous show, we talked about your new book and also a very important spiritual discipline, fasting. You've got a new book, the 21-Day Fast Start, and we talked about the significance of fasting, particularly going through a financial fast. But on today, I want to actually get into one of the topics that you cover on day 2 of this 21-day fasting journey, and that is developing your mind. MIND is an acronym that stands for Money, Intelligence, Need, and Discipline. But I love for us to talk about this because, George, often people have no idea why this topic in particular is super important. And I always love to start with Hosea 4 and 6. It's a key verse for me. It's a verse that I often reflect on. And sometimes I reflect on this verse and it brings more conviction than sometimes comfort, because God says that his people, us, perish because of a lack of knowledge. And you know, I grew up hearing that verse, George, for many, many years, but it was not until I really studied that passage that I really understood the meaning of this verse. What Hosea is talking about here is not unintentional ignorance. It is not about the fact that we perish because there's some things that we don't know and we don't know what we don't know. What Hosea is talking about specifically is willful ignorance. This is that ignorance where we have an opportunity to gain knowledge in a particular area, but we choose to ignore it. We choose to just be oblivious to it. And because of that, we subsequently perish. And so, George, we want to talk about why this is important, because when you start talking about developing your mind, your understanding of money, your intelligence, your need, and your discipline, if you want to accomplish financial freedom, if you want to grow financially, then you've got to grow educationally as it relates to your finances. You cannot move to this next level in your financial journey if you don't know any better. My grandmother used to say, if you know better, then you can do better.
Right.
And that's a big part of why this is significant. Let's start there, George.
Good. Let's start, and then we're supposed to start with money, but actually I'm going to start with intelligence. So first of all, let's start with biblical intelligence. So, you know, in the Bible, let's use that. This, by the way, is one of my Financial Stewardship Bible. There are over 2,300 scriptures that mention finances. In this Bible right here, they actually take the time to actually highlight all of the financial scriptures in the Bible that deal with money and possessions.
Wow.
You see this right here? So look at this. See all these things? So there is no lack of knowledge. Now, by the way, I want to say something. My book is awesome. But the best financial book in the world
is the Bible.
Is the Bible.
Come on now.
Is the Bible. So there is more information. See, there's just so much where they teach it. And then if you look at the parables, they talk about how people possess things. And it's so funny now, people talk about, hey, how much money does Elon Musk have? Or how much money does Bill Gates have? The people in the Bible had more. Absolutely. You want to know why? Because what they had is like, nowadays people have money and currency. Yep. See, in the Bible, they had land and then they had they had animals, they had animals, meaning like, let's just say chickens, cows, pigs, and horses. By the way, we already did a podcast on this. So their animals could reproduce. They had more animals, different things like this.
Yeah.
And then that's actually how they gave. They would tithe. That's how they would actually give. So, but now we give in dividends, interest, capital gains, income, things like that.
Yep.
But just so we know, the best financial book is the Bible. Then I'm trying to run right up next to it. I'm trying to be second, okay, in that area. But you see, there is more than enough knowledge. And then also, you want to talk about that education gap. There was a time when we didn't know a lot about investing. We didn't know a lot about these different things. Now we actually have our podcast where we're teaching so many things. We're teaching, and then this is the difference between this podcast and then I think with a lot of them is that we're very practical. Like we're saying things you want to do. Wait, I got a praise report, for example. So we did a podcast. We talked about how to save money on trips. So I made the claim, and also you made the claim. But I just want to let you know I'm cashing mine in, and I got the receipts today, Pastor Van. So I'm going to let you know if you can outdo me. I am going to our family reunion, and so I booked all of our travel and everything on points. But I bought one thing. I bought my airline ticket because I don't ever travel. I don't use mine. I always want to get credit for mine, like auditing. So I always pay for my ticket. But my wife, kids, everything like this. And then we're at a particular hotel, and I did the reservations there. So I just want to let you know all of my travel. So far, I haven't spent anything, and everything. We already have our airline tickets and everything like that. So I'm gonna say that. And then number two is I usually would bring food with me. That I do, like when I went to Hawaii last year, you guys remember, I brought all the food with me. I'm not going to do that because food is cheaper in Kansas City than it is here in LA, in LA. So in doing it. But so these are practical things that we taught. So this summer, so when you go on your trip, we'll come back and compare. But right now I'm at zero. So anyway, we'll see. All right, go ahead.
You know, I think when you start talking about money and intelligence, George, it is so important for us to raise this question. You know, and this is part of the reason why you and I started this podcast, because we wanted to create platforms of education for people. You know, a lot of people not only perish because of a lack of knowledge, but they allow that lack of knowledge to literally control their life and their future. You know, I just didn't know. Okay, well then a part of developing your mind is seeking out those centers of education. Podcasts, you know, what kind of podcast are you listening to that's helping you to grow in your financial education? What kind of books are you reading that's helping you to grow in your financial education? George, I'll tell you a story. Many years ago, gosh, I was a high school student, I think, getting ready to go to college. And there was a gentleman who ended up becoming a financial mentor of mine. He lived down the street from my dad. And I used to visit my dad in the summers. And one day I was out in my father's front yard helping him do yard work. And a gentleman drove by, Rick Cook. And Rick Cook pulled over. He said, "Hey, man, your father tells me that you want to go into ministry." And I said, "Yes, sir. I feel like I'm called into ministry." And he said, "Well, here's what I want to do." He said, "I want to mentor you in business." He says, "Because too many pastors, particularly pastors of color, don't know business." He said, "You know, and if you would allow me to mentor you, you're gonna be a bad leader when you grow up, in a good way. Bad meaning good. You know, this is Michael Jackson, right. You know, bad era, right?" And initially, I didn't know what to do other than say yes, sir. And so, because I didn't know what financial mentorship really involved, but I look back and I never forget that, and I never forget the wisdom and lessons that he taught me, because it changed my life. And you know, the first thing that he did in that conversation, he said, "Okay, I'm gonna mentor you financially." He says, "Here's the first thing I need you to do." He said, "I need you to go to the bookstore and I need you to buy all these books." And he just gave me a list of books that I needed to go and read. And that was the start of my mentorship, right? I remember reading Robert Kiyosaki's books, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? I remember reading The Millionaire Next Door. I remember reading Robert Allen's book, Multiple Streams of Income. And all of these books opened my mind, right? Because these books were teaching concepts about money that I had no clue. I was just a little kid from Southwest Atlanta that had goals and dreams. but I did have the education to match those goals and dreams. And so what those books did is they gave me that education that really started me thinking differently and started me down a different path towards those financial goals. A lot of people, and I say this because a lot of people have goals. I don't know, George, that you and I have ever spoken to somebody that didn't have a financial goal. But the difference between having a goal and accomplishing that goal is often, do you have the education and the exposure to help you take the next steps towards that goal? And that's why developing your financial mind is so important, because you cannot grow in an area that you're not growing in. Oh, that's so good. I got to say it again. I'm going to do like you, George, and I'm going to clap on that one.
I know, I'm writing. Go ahead.
You can't grow in an area that you're not growing in. And so if you're not developing yourself in the particular area, you're not going to see growth in that area. And so if you want to get better financially, then the first question is, what are the things that you're doing that's providing a greater financial education?
Right. And it's like you said, that you open up the right thing, is that you have a goal. So when people go right to the goal and then they're being very intentional, guys, always listen to other shows we also did. Listen to part 1 of this, of what we did. But you want to have a goal. So if you remember Moses, when he wanted to take people to the promised land, they wandered around in the wilderness for 40 years. Do you guys know that if he would have walked from point A to point B, and you don't have to have a whole geometry lesson and everything, that's the quickest is to take a straight line.
Yep.
You know how long it would have taken them to get from point A to the promised land, point B? 11 days.
Yep.
You don't want to do that in your life. Now we're talking about money, but then look at this in relationships, look at this in job, look at this with your health, where you keep starting over trying to do this, keep starting over trying to do that. That's why this fast is so important into saying, let's be intentional. Like you said earlier, again, you guys got to add color commentary. He said, the person said, I want you, he said, Mr. Cook said he wanted you to get these books because he wanted you to have not just knowledge. Do you guys understand there's something called knowledge? That means know-how. Wisdom is experienced knowledge, meaning that you know how to make it. You know how to make it do what it do. Like, in other words, like, you know how to do that. Like, whenever you watch Navy SEAL movies, they like say, hey, make sure you duck down before you come in that door, because they've been in somewhere where they've seen what happens if you don't. Yep. But then you know what happens when you don't. So it's the same thing financially, because this is another thing financially that I want to hit on, is there's so much information out there, but there's not a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
Like they're saying, do this, buy that, do this, do that, do that, do that. But hey, that's why when you sit down and you want to make sure you're using your mind, money, intelligence, go to people that have done it before. So I'm going to use physical right now. If you're looking at working out or nutrition, you want to go to someone that's in shape.
Yep.
So if you're going to get advice from someone financial, make sure they're in financial shape. Like they did it. They're not just telling you something they read in no book. They read in a book and everything like this. They actually did this. So that's how you're walking through it. And we model this, like you saw me say a few minutes ago, like, hey, like I cashed them out. Hey, I did this. This is how I saved doing that. Or we do it, and then it's fun. You know, instead of keeping up with the Joneses, we keep it up with the Thompsons, we're showing it. The flex is saving the money, not spending it.
Yeah. No, you know what's really significant about that, George, is it is super critical for people to make sure that they have a growth plan, and a growth plan goes beyond just the budget. It's the mentorship, it's the education, and a lot of times that's the missing piece. So I'm glad to hear you say that. Go to individuals or read books written by people that are in financial shape. Listen to podcasts like ours, for an example, where we're giving you these practical steps, because a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. In educational theory, it's fascinating because there are several levels of education. Education theory suggests that before a person starts learning, they really have to go through these steps in order to get to the first rung of the ladder for education. And the first step is unconscious ignorance. That's what I mean when I say that we don't know what we don't know. And that's really big when it comes to finances. A lot of times we don't know what we don't know, because particularly when you start talking about certain individuals in our country, a lot of individuals, George, are first and second generation college educated high income earners. So, I think about myself. My mother was the first person in our family to go to college, but she didn't teach me about money. She didn't know about it, right? I mean, she knew how to pay her bills and to make ends meet, but savvy financial principles, she didn't know. And so a lot of individuals fall into that category. Maybe you are first generation college educated, a second generation, or maybe you're the first person in your family to earn a significant level of income. I'm willing to bet you that most individuals didn't have dinner table conversations with parents that talked about, okay, here's how you create wealth. Here's how you take that job and parlay it into, wealth. And so many people, George, are at that first level of unconscious ignorance. They don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And so education theory says that, hey, we start at unconscious ignorance. Then we go to conscious ignorance. This is when we say, oh, I didn't know that. Right? This is when we become aware that there are things we don't know. And then the third level is when you start learning. So what's interesting is a lot of people are at unconscious ignorance. They don't know what they don't know. And if you don't have a plan to develop, your money and your intelligence by way of, what you're going to read, what you're going to learn, what you're going to be plugged into, whether it's podcasts or mentors, so many people, George, stay at that place of unconscious ignorance. And this is what Hosea is talking about when we talk about a lack of knowledge is why we perish, because we live our life at this level of unconscious ignorance, and you can't begin to grow if you stay at that level. You've got to go from unconscious ignorance to conscious ignorance, and that comes through exposure, that comes through education. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I did not know, the benefits of a financial fast. Oh, I did not know that if I did a budget, I could do X, Y, and Z. Oh, I did not know that I ought to start by maxing out things like my 401k and my 403b. Oh, I did not know that I could use real estate to be, a vehicle to supercharge, my wealth building journey. And then once you realize, oh, I didn't know that, then you take that third step and you're like, okay, now teach me how to do it. Now you begin to create your future.
Right. And then everything looks different to you. Like, do you see the people that are watching this, as you guys watch other episodes of me, are you watching how that I get this every time I preach. I didn't know that was in the Bible. I've never heard it that way before. And I'm literally just reading the Bible. When I read Matthew 25:4, and I just read it to people. And then it says, or the promises that are, if you just read the promises God makes to people, I'll make you I'll bless you. Those will be blessed through you. Do you guys understand? He's talking about businesses. He's talking about you owning things, you being the head and not the tail. It's like, it's like the more you know and the more you're aware, it's like the more confident you become, not just in yourself, it's just what God's plan is for you and how you lay it out. So after you get all that, then that moves us to N, which is, remember, M was money, and then I was intelligent. N is we find out what the need is. Like, in other words, is you have to want to be financial. It's like, in other words, saying, hey, look, my need is I would like to own a home so my family can have somewhere. Or you actually need to have, you brought up earlier, generational wealth. Because generational wealth is two ways. You have to teach knowledge. And then the second part is money. But you have to actually teach your kids about finance and everything like that. Because I don't want my kids, I don't want them to be ignorant about finances. So that's why they know. Like when the minute they walk into a Costco, they know we own stock in that. Or they know that Dad's really not going to do it if we don't own it. We're really, or when he's doing it, I'm act like I'm in pain. Like they're throwing, I'm act like I'm in pain whenever I'm spending money and I don't own it. But you see what they're doing is that's a mindset. And in understanding that, and then also and just in doing that, and then the fourth actually is discipline. Is what you said is when people learn something, they have to start having the discipline to keep doing. Like you said, maxing on your 401k, putting away monthly. So what you want to do is put your mind on autopilot, meaning that you're putting the money in autopilot that you're doing, and you're walking through that.
Yeah, and one of the most important concepts that I want to unpack a little bit more, George, is I think the order of these things, money, intelligence, need, and discipline, is extremely important, because there are a lot of individuals that have, a goal, like I want more, right? But because they don't follow the logical sequence here, developing your money and your intelligence, and making sure that you have a need and a discipline. They don't do it in that order. A lot of times they fail to reach their goal. And let me tell you why. Because we talked about sacrifice earlier in the episode on fasting. But if you don't have a legitimate need, the other way that I describe this notion of need is you have to have a driver.
Yeah.
You have to have a financial why. Simon Sinek talks
The
about
why.
to your why. Like you've got to have a why. You've got to have this innate drive and desire that I want to change my financial future. When we did our Empower Financial Conference earlier this year, I was so moved not only by your story, George, but I was so moved also by the story of the gentleman who's a savvy real estate investor.
Oh yeah.
And his drive was when he was getting married, couldn't even afford a home for his family. And how he was like,
His
he woke up
wife
in the
had to
middle of the night.
co-sign, right? His
His
wife's
wife had
family,
to,
right?
yeah. And he said he woke up in the middle of the night with a panic attack because he was kind of like, man, how am I going to provide for my family? That's his why. That is what drove him from not having to having more than as it relates to real estate investing. And so he went from nothing to creating wealth because he was driven. Now, the reason why you got to have a why or be driven is because that is what is going to give you the fuel to do the next thing, which is have the discipline
Right.
to get there. A lot of people don't have the discipline because they don't have the need. They don't have the drive. They haven't tapped into their why. But you got to have the discipline. Oh, I can't help it. I got to go to Starbucks. Oh, I can't help it. I got to buy a new
Right.
handbag. What that really says is you're not driven.
You don't want it.
You don't want it. You haven't identified the need, or the need is not big enough for you to then have that discipline. And so doing
Right.
it in the order, understanding money, intelligence, right? That's the education, that's being exposed, but then the need. And then
Right.
the need is what will fuel your discipline. I love
And
it.
that
Live
need
like
is
no one
huge. Yeah.
else so you can live like no one else. If people hear us talking about how we travel and how we bring an extra suitcase of food and all of that. And I know, George, people listen to us and say, well, that's crazy. I'm not doing that. Well, it's because you
Yeah.
and I are driven, right?
Right.
You talk about going to stores where you own stock. That's the way that I run my life. My son was
Right.
like, Dad, I can't believe that you waited 5 years to get your Rivian, right?
Yeah.
I got it now, and it's great. But my son was like, I can't believe, man, I would have bought another car in 5 years. No, because I'm not going to own stock in these other cars, but I own stock in
Yeah.
Rivian. So I will
Right.
wait and invest in Rivian because I own stock in the company. So it's
Right.
all of these things. Like that was that discipline to say, I am not going to buy another car. I'm going to drive this car that I've had for 10 plus years until the wheels fall off. And almost the wheels literally did fall off in the 5 years I was waiting for my Rivian. But the
Right.
point is, now that I have the Rivian, every day that I get in that car, I recognize that discipline's paid off because I'm driving something that I'm investing in and I'm seeing the benefits of it. But that takes discipline.
Exactly.
Takes discipline.
But you're doing two things. Not only are you see, so everyone just again color commentating. What he's doing is he's showing delayed gratification
Yeah,
because
buddy.
it's so easy just to go out and get another car. But also you're teaching generational wealth to your kids because see when you bought the Rivian, you're actually paying yourself dividends.
Come on
So
now.
what happens is you have to start looking at so like my kids, they literally know that they're not there that they know that. So like even if they come up to me now, they even try to come up. Remember the Roblox and these little video games? Like, Dad, do we own Roblox? I
Hmm.
said, yes, we do. Okay, then can I have some Robux? And like they know now, but you see, they don't even come with that stuff, and because they start to go and you start getting that culture for your family. But hey, but you also said, so we do it in order, but I want to say one more last thing about why. That why is a whole driven. So if you guys can, if you're under 40, just type it down. If you're over 40, write it down. What are your whys as to why you want to do things? For example, all of my real estate, the why is my kids. I want them, any properties I buy from here on out are just for my kids so that they're not starting from scratch. It's like we're running a marathon and I see that, let's say we're running 100 yards, they're already at the 50-yard marker. You don't want to, so what I'm doing is that's my why. So attach to why you want to do things and have your why. All right. Hey, can I make an announcement? Can I make an announcement? I have an announcement right now for everybody. You know how people said, remember we said money, intelligence, need, discipline.
Yeah.
Dr. Moody just said earlier, he said, we want to do them in order. So I want to make some announcements right now on the Freedom Podcast. Okay, announcement number one. There is no shortage of money in the
Yep.
United States.
Yep.
There is no shortage. They are printing it right now as we speak.
Yep.
I went to New York and went into the Federal Reserve. And then I said, hey, I need to get some money. And then, by the way, I want to get some money. So anyway, I walked in and got $300,000. So I just want to show it to you anyway, what this looks like. So,
Wow.
boop, boop, boop. So anyway, this is $300,000. So then someone's going to say on the podcast, and I have some more behind me over here, but this is as much as I can hold just right now, but take more, actually I have $1 million. Someone says, how do I know this is $300,000? Actually, me and the clerk, me and the lady that worked there for 20 years, Miss Gwen, she's very, very nice. We do it by weight.
That's it. You waited.
This is one thought. Now we're going to preach a sermon on this later, okay? But just run up on it. So it's 1, 5s, this is 20s and 100s, mainly 20s. So I want you to think about this right now for all the people saying I don't have any money. From the time of your birth until now, how much money has gone through your hands?
Oh,
So
wow.
if someone makes $30,000, so easily most people can say they've gone through $1 million, okay? So, or let's look at how much money you how much you made, salary, everything, gross pay, okay? I know you had to pay tax, you had to pay this, you had to pay that. So where's all that money right now? Now I want to talk to you about stewardship. I went, and then you can also follow, I have this up on social media. I go to schools, and I always ask kids how much money they've seen, or adults, everything. And then when I put this there, kids are enamored. And guess what kids say the first thing? I want to put this money back together and utilize it. And then I ask them this question: how long would it take for you to put this together? Now, I know this, and by the way, I'm seeing this, and you don't see it, you're seeing it this way. But it'd be impossible, because this is, money is, bills are not made out of paper, it's actually cloth. So what happens is it'd be very difficult for you to put this back together, because you have to actually put it back together in the right denominations.
Mm-hmm.
But this is my question to you today about using your mind. How long would it take you to put it back together? And then how long would it take you to make and invest and have $300,000?
Mm.
That's using your why, your money, your intelligence, and your discipline.
Yep. That's so good. That's so good. Well, family, listen, we are out of time, but we are never out of content. And so I want to thank once again my co-host with the most, my brother from another mother, Pastor George Thompson, all the way from LA, for joining us as my co-host today on the Freedom Podcast, where we specifically are leaning into all things finances. And so, hey, if this podcast has been of any value to you, I want to encourage you to like the podcast, follow us. Hey, give us a 5-star rating. It helps the podcast to move up and hopefully expose other people that desperately need this wisdom to this incredible podcast. So if you love this podcast, like it, subscribe to it, write a good review. If you didn't like it, keep your thoughts to yourself. No, I'm just kidding. If there's things that we can do to do better, we'd love to get your feedback. But most importantly, I want to thank you for joining us. Hey, George, as we close, let the people know how they can connect with you, plug into your brand new book, The 21-Day Fast Start, and connect on all things from the Financial Maven. How do they connect with you?
All right, hey, before you connect with me, hey, everybody, can everybody just give me a high five? I know right now you're sitting home. Just give me a high five. Can you think of 5 people that this would be a blessing to, that you can help, and that you can send this to? And by the way, look at our playlist. Whatever platform you're watching us on, look at some other video, and then think about 5 people that you can send this to, that we can all do this together and build generational wealth. So, hey, how to get in contact with me and also follow me. I have two websites, but the simplest one is go to ican'tfindgeorge.com, and then that lists all of my social media where I'm actually, I actually brought this into LA Unified School District, and just watch these kids, how I teach them all how to invest. I call it the Wealth Academy to kids, but then also adults. There's fresh content on there, literally enough to be able to bless you. ican'tfindgeorge.com or georgebthompson.com, and that's the easiest way just to find me.
Excellent. You can always find me at vanmoody.org or twccc.org. And we are always every month uploading fresh content on a variety of topics, leadership, spiritual development and discipleship studies, and a host of other free content that we know will add a lot of value to your life. So listen, thank you for joining us on the Freedom Podcast, where our focus today is financial freedom with myself, Dr. Van Moody, and my co-host, Pastor George Thompson. We hope to see you on another episode. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Freedom Podcast. For a broader range of topics, go to Van Moody's YouTube page or visit twccc.org.